earlier, PhDs were very rarely employed in an industry. It was again Professor Sharma's efforts where PhDs started getting employment in an industry. And Professor Sharma was the one who convinced industry that do employ some PhDs from ICT and you will benefit. And when the industry started seeing the benefits, of course, the opportunities of the students increase in terms of PhD students also finding a job in an industry. Now, when you do a PhD, in addition to only sticking to academics, now you also have a possibility to join an industry with significant industrial research currently going on in India. That the first 4 PhDs in engineering and technology in India came from UDCPT, which allowed us to initiate or start UDCPT with only 2 courses, chemical engineering and textile engineering or textile chemistry and engineering, because those were the only 2 sort of branches of engineering which were required at that point of time. Subsequently, with the growth in the chemical sciences, we started introducing pharmaceuticals chemistry, polymer chemistry, paint chemistry, food chemistry, dyes and intermediate chemistry. I mean, every faculty in ICT almost gets double the salary, his own salary and consultancy money, which is probably sometimes equal to or more than the salary itself. In fact, some of our faculty are such that 1/3 of the consultancy fees are paid to ICT, return.
Good evening, Professor Pandit, and thanks a lot for giving your precious time to me today, sir.
Thank you very much, and good evening to you all.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to have interaction with you today, and there I have made some homework for me, and I made some kind of questionnaire here, sir. So
Yeah.
I will be going through one by one, and then I'll be asking you those things.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I start now, sir? Can I start first interaction point?
Please do. Please
Okay.
go.
Sir, my first interaction point is related to you only. You are a graduate of IIT BHU.
Yes.
And after that, you graduated in 1980. You graduated in 1980, and
Yeah.
after that, sir, you did your doctorate from University Department of Chemical Technology, what we call today as ICT.
Correct.
So related to this, I have 2 questions to ask you, sir. Number 1, being graduate of IIT BHU, it is very less probability that you stay back home in India. Normally you go abroad and pursue for greener pastures and pursue doctorate there and all, but you prefer to be in India. The reason for that, and number 2 question is, that time you prefer to be in ICT, doctorate from PhD from ICT rather than from IITs and all.
Yeah.
So that speaks about this institute. So my second question is related to that, why ICT? And I could not find you did your masters, so that simply means you could have got directly PhD, which is also prestigious thing. So these couple of things I want to ask you, sir.
Sure. Let me just explain to that. As you correctly pointed out, after I did my BTech in 1980, I was a second rank holder in the Institute of Chemical Technology, IT. It used to be called as ITBHU at that time before it became IIT. So it used to be called as BHU IT, Banaras Hindu University Institute of Technology. So after I did my BTech in 1980, I'm originally from Mumbai, so I wanted to come back and pursue higher studies. My father, who was a chemistry graduate and chemistry teacher and was retired as a vice principal of National College, Mumbai. So education is in our field, so he wanted me to continue research, do not stop at BTech. So I had a job offer from Engineers India Limited. I had a fellowship offer from University of Kentucky. But when I came back to Mumbai, because of the family circumstances, it wasn't possible for me to immediately go out. Subsequently, what happened was my classmate, Sri Sudhir Joshi, whose father was a vice chancellor of Mumbai University at that point of time. And he had secured an admission in University of Texas at Austin. So at that time, Professor Ram Joshi had organized a party, a sort of a party for his ward going abroad. And at that time, I met Professor Sharma. And I knew about UDCT at that point of time. And it was known to be the best chemical engineering department. I was completely sold when I met Professor Sharma in that particular party. And I said that if I am going to do my master's and PhD, I will do it from UDCT, nowhere else. So I immediately applied. And since I was a second rank holder, there was no problem in getting an admission for master's. So I did master's. But I did not do PhD with Professor Sharma. I did my PhD with the Professor J.B. Joshi. So I'm Professor J.B. Joshi's first PhD student. So Professor Joshi was out at that point of time. So Professor Sharma asked me, who do you want to choose as a guide? And I looked at the research interest and I thought Professor Joshi was the best matching my interest. And he was out in Pittsburgh at that point of time. So first 6 months, I was just left on my own. And my de facto guide was Professor Sharma only. And we started writing that review paper where I got an opportunity to write. So the first paper which I got, a publication which I got, was written by Professor M.M. Sharma, Professor J.B. Joshi, and A.B. Pandit. So that just started and it felt like that. Again, at that point of time, after the written examination, the first 2 students or 3 students in the written examination were allowed to convert their registration from master's to PhD. And I was a second rank holder here as well. So I got converted my registration to PhD and I completed my PhD in 1984.
That's great journey, Professor Pandit.
Yeah.
So now I come to, sir, your research area, and
Yeah.
you have done marvelous work in the domain of cavitation phenomena. And cavitation phenomena is used in variety of operations such as crystallization, emulsification, nanoparticle synthesis, and processes such as esterification and oxidation. It is very much useful in the industries. Sir, I want you to tell us very simple terms, what is cavitation all about?
Yeah, sure. I will do that. I think it has to be taught with respect to some history. So when I completed my PhD in 1984, every PhD student had to give a research colloquium. And at that point of time, when in December 1983, the head of the department of Cambridge University, UK, was visiting UDCT at that point of time. So Professor Sharma said that you are giving your colloquium in front of him, your PhD colloquium in front of him. And my work was related to multi-phase reactors and especially in mechanically agitated contactors. So I gave my research colloquium, and the following day, Professor Sharma asked me that John Davidson, who was my PhD supervisor, who was my collaborator in Cambridge, has asked that whether Pandit is interested in going to Cambridge to do a postdoc work. So again, I didn't have to do any applications or anything. And the best part about Cambridge was, while I was working on that particular project, I also got an opportunity to develop this particular cavitation phenomena. Cavitation phenomena, simply speaking, is essentially a boiling of water at room temperature. So everybody knows that as the pressure reduces, the boiling point reduces. If you are able to reduce the pressure to a level where it matches the vapor pressure of water at room temperature, water will spontaneously boil. And this is followed using Bernoulli's principle. Those who understand, there is a relationship between velocity and pressure. Total energy remains the same. So kinetic energy and pressure energy are balanced. You increase the kinetic energy, pressure energy goes down. So you increase the kinetic energy to such a level that pressure becomes equal to vapor pressure. Part of the water spontaneously vaporizes. It forms a vapor cavity. And if you make this cavity travel and take it to a relatively higher pressure zone, then these cavities collapse. So all the energy which this cavity has collected is released in one go. Now there is a phenomena in nature where some of the natural animals also use a phenomena of cavitation. There is a sea creature called snapping shrimp. Now this snapping shrimp actually throws a cavity, and this collapsing cavity creates a shock wave, and the prey is paralyzed because of that shock wave. It's like bursting an atom bomb next to your ear during Diwali, and you get partially paralyzed. So something like that happens to that prey, and then this snapping shrimp eats it. So this cavitation phenomena, I got an opportunity to work on first in Cambridge, because I was working on a ICI sponsored project at that point of time. They were working on a project which was called as development of biodegradable polymers. So polybutyrate and polybutyric acid. These are biodegradable polymers. Now they are grown inside a microbial cell. So to recover the polymer from the cell needs to be disrupted. It needs to be broken. So we exploited this cavitation phenomena first in Cambridge for the disruption of microbial cells to recover a biodegradable polymer. Now that was the first paper which came using hydrodynamic cavitation, and subsequently the journey started. It was extremely difficult to publish that particular work because nobody had done anything like that. So it was extremely difficult to publish it because people were unable to understand what I was talking about and how is it possible, so on and so forth. But in 1990, the same snapping shrimp was actually videographed by a Dutch scientist and presented it in a conference. And I happened to be chairing that particular conference, that particular lecture. This happened in 2000. So for 8 years we struggled, but in 2000, when somebody else from outside proved that yes, indeed, this is possible naturally, the acceptability increased significantly. And since then, I mean, more than 1,000 papers have appeared on this particular subject. But that is how it started. And I thought that history was necessary.
Yes,
so,
it was.
So it is serendipitous to understand the origin as well as the growth of cavitation as a phenomenon.
Great, sir. So me, myself from mechanical engineering, I know cavitation phenomena in the turbines, reaction turbines.
Yes,
that
exactly.
is how it takes place. But the natural phenomena which you could tell, sir, Professor, I was not knowing that. It is wonderfully explained.
If you go and look into YouTube and type snapping shrimp,
I will do that, sir.
Find that particular video. It's a very nicely made video. And it is worthwhile. Even in the turbines which you talk about, we did a program for Department of Atomic Energy, the sodium wave pumping of liquid sodium in fast breeder reactors.
Right, sir.
Similarly, the cavitation damage to the pump occurs, which could solve by changing the profile of the blades.
Great, sir. Great, sir. Professor Pandit, my next question is related to your another achievement like patents. Sir, I was seeing like last 5 years, you have gathered some 16 patents in your name. What I understand is patent is a very, very costly affair to file and it takes time. So how did you manage to do this, sir, in 5 years? Almost 3 patents per year.
Let me answer it in terms of 2 specific parts. It is not really difficult and expensive to file a patent. If you are willing to write your own patent in your own language to start with, the provisional patent filing will not cost you more than 4,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees. However, when it comes to the registration of that particular patent in various other countries, that becomes extremely expensive. Every country will charge you anywhere from $400 to $2,000 per year. So there is no problem in patenting something. But when you want to sell and continue that patent alive, then it is necessary for you to keep spending. Now, when you get a patent, whether to keep that patent alive or not also depends upon the licensing ability of that patent. If you are able to exploit that patent, sell it and license it, then only it is worthwhile maintaining it. Otherwise, it is not required. You might as well publish it. Fortunately, under Indian conditions in Indian law, you can file a patent even after you have published the work within a year of publication. In fact, I have done that. So I published the paper first and within a year I filed the patent. So only those patents which are exploitable and which are capable of making money should be maintained. Otherwise, there is no harm in just letting that patent go off. And some of the patents out of these 16 patents, we have just kept it open. Anyone can use it and use it to an extent that it is socially useful. We are not interested in making money out of it. But getting patent is an official recognition of innovation. And that's why patents are important.
Professor Pandit, my next question to you is like you have already told us something about the patent filing, reporting a patent, and how
Yeah.
we should publish that in journal. That you have already answered. Now, commercialization of the patent, sir. We should not file the patent or have the patent in our name for the sake of it, unless until it gets commercialized. So,
Indeed.
what is your advice to so many researchers and scholars there who should come out with the real good patents who are commercialized? Like I was going through the details of even institutes like IIT Delhi, which in QS ranking is one of the highest in India. But even in that institute, sir, majority of the patents they have filed are not commercially viable. So, what is your advice on that part?
Now, there are two parts to the patent. As I said, the patents which are filed by academics. So their objective is, as I said earlier, is not necessarily to make money out of that particular patent. They want an official recognition of the innovative steps which they have included in that. To commercialize a patent, you require an association of the industry. ICT model has always been the fact that you involve an industry wherever you feel that there is a chance of getting an IP, intellectual property. You involve that industry right at that particular stage of concept of POCs. The moment POC is available, involve an industry and let that industry spend money in either filing the patent, maintaining the patent, while you give a first right of refusal to that particular sponsoring agency. So if that company is not interested in exploiting that particular patent, then we may have a completely different strategy in terms of marketing agency, marketing your patent, so on and so forth. However, if the company is willing to exploit that particular patent, then you have an arrangement of some upfront money and some 0.2%, 0.5% of the sales as a royalty. So the company is the one which is going to really look whether there is a commercial possibility in the patent. Majority of the academics do not have that judgment whether the patent is sellable or not. And that only can be judged by a proper business people who have the capability of running a chemical or a business which uses the IP.
That also tells us about close requirement of industry academia interaction, sir. That is
Absolutely,
also the
absolutely.
part.
Without that, there's no point. I mean, you will get so many, as you said, that 16 patents on my name. Probably somebody will have 50 patents on his name, 100 patents on his name. But very rarely you will find that they have made huge amount of money exploiting those particular patents.
Great. Professor Pandit, you are not only great researcher, scholar, administrator, you are a great teacher also, sir. And you have been awarded with Indian National Academy Science Best Teacher Award in 2012.
Yeah.
You are known to have contributed to innovation in teaching at graduate and postgraduate level. And I want you to give the message, I mean, how the teachers in Premium Institute and otherwise, because India need great teachers. Other day I was interacting with Professor Sharma, and he was telling me that there is a tree in his house which
Yeah.
shows 1,000 PhDs, one
Yeah.
after another, and that cascading effect.
PhDs and
So
PhDs are the
PhD and
PhDs,
PhD.
so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And he was also quite proud of his own students, and many named. He gave many names. So I
Yeah.
want, sir, what is your message to become a great teacher?
Uh, to be honest with you, teaching is a passion.
Yes, sir.
You really need to enjoy to see. It's like, in my opinion, giving a lecture to a class is equivalent to performing on a stage in a
True.
show. You get a kick out of it. All those actors, I'm not talking about movie actors, I'm talking about the stage actors. Every stage show is unique. So similarly, even though you might be teaching the same subject, every lecture is unique, is a new show. And you should approach teaching as if you are performing in front of these particular students. And the kind of joy which you get with that particular performance is phenomenal. And in my opinion, unless you derive that kind of a joy, you will not be in a position to teach passionately. To see that some concept which you are explaining have been understood. You see a sudden glint in the eyes of your students, and you see that it's like getting an applause for an actor who delivers his dialogue very professionally, or hitting a punchline so properly that everybody spontaneously describes. So teaching is an enjoyable activity for those who enjoy teaching.
That's true.
Now, I have been born and brought up in a teacher, let's say, family. My father was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my father-in-law was a teacher, my mother-in-law was a teacher. So essentially, the teaching is in the blood.
Yes.
So in addition to this INSA Teaching Award, we also at ICT have a R.A. Rajadeksha Best Teacher Award, which is given by the students for a teacher. So every year students vote for a particular teacher, and the name in whose this award is given, Professor R.A. Rajadeksha, was also my teacher, was one of the best teachers which I had ever encountered. And of course, Professor Sharma, Professor J.B. Joshi, they fall in the same category, but Professor Rajadeksha died early. So in his memory, this award was instituted by the students. In the past 25 years of my teaching, I've been teaching for nearly 29 years. In the past 25 years of teaching, 22 times I have been awarded as the best teacher by the students themselves. So, I mean, I don't do anything for that. In fact, after 3 years, I said that that's enough now. You don't have to vote. But students, you can't dictate them. They said that if we don't want to, I mean, we don't want to vote for anybody else, but you want to vote for us, otherwise we will not vote.
Okay.
You can't say anything like that.
Yeah.
But fortunately now we have been able to have many awards for the teachers. And in addition to recognition in terms of number of publications, so on and so forth, every class teacher now is awarded the Best Teacher Award based on his teaching efforts. So teaching is important because the teaching only will prompt you to do research, and the effect is reversible.
Great, sir. Professor Pandit, you took over as Vice Chancellor of ICT Institute of Chemical Technology during
Yeah.
the pandemic phase, COVID shutdown phase. So I want to ask you, sir, how challenging it was and how tough was it?
In a way, it was challenging in terms of maintaining and managing the regular working of the students. In a way, it was a boon. The simple reason, all the extraneous effect and extraneous demand on my time were brought to zero. So I was here every day, irrespective of lockdown or no lockdown. I have been coming to college every day. Every Saturday, every Sunday, I have been coming to college. And because the visitors were very few and you could only have few online meetings to attend, I had plenty of time on my hand. So that was a boon, which allowed me to standardize and rationalize all the rules and regulations, all the administrative setups, could individually talk to the every stakeholder involved in the organization or working of ICT. So that was extremely useful or helpful. The other challenge was that how the contents had to be delivered to the students. You could not waste 6 months of students' time or years of students' time. And that is where I must appreciate the willingness of shown by the students themselves. Students were willing to bend their ways. They were not so rigid as sometimes students are known to. They were willing to accept a different style of learning. They were willing to accept different methods of assessment. They were willing to accept different methods of examination, different formats of assessment and marking system. So, and this is only possible if you do not decide a priori without consulting the students. My always motto has been is whenever you are trying to bring in any change, please involve all the stakeholders where the change is likely to affect them. Have a discussion with them, tell them that this is the change which you are trying to bring it out. If somebody has some opposition to that, you try to convince him otherwise, because you have made that decision and it is mandatory for you to implement that decision. But at least do it in such a way that people get the feeling that their opinions are valued. But because of this available time, it was possible for us to do that. I won't say I think for the first 3 months or so, there was a bit of disruption. But once we started our examination, the regular online lectures, things have been happening very well. Unfortunately, we have not been able to conduct the practical examination as well. But we have arranged our courses in such a way that some of the practicals which would be conducted here will be conducted in the next semester. Some of the courses which are to be taught next semester, we brought it advanced, and effectively we could manage that.
Great, sir. Great. Professor Pandit, my next question is related to ICT and its evolution. So this institute was established in 1933 and granted deemed university status in 2008.
Yeah.
And it became the only state-funded deemed university in India. And in 2018 Feb, it was given status of Category 1 institute with graded autonomy by Ministry of HRD and UGC. Now it looks like it took a lot of time to get autonomy for ICT. So my question is, what do we really mean by having autonomy for an institute, and what is the impact of deemed university status and of autonomy to ICT?
Yeah, okay. Not that the efforts of UDCT getting autonomy started way back in 1970s itself, 75 or so. Many attempts were made earlier by the earlier directors as well. But finally, Professor Joshi's efforts bore fruits, and we got that autonomy in 2008. But one of the major reasons for that, we would not have got that autonomy unless the TechWIP, that is the Technical Education Quality Improvement Program of World Bank, was implemented. And one of the mandates of that particular program was that you will be entitled to get the TechWIP World Bank help only if the institute is run autonomously. So it was mandatory, and the quantum was significant at that point of time. The quantum was to the tune of 23 or 25 crores of rupees for TechWIP 1 is the quantum which was available. Now, it was not easy for either the Mumbai University or the Maharashtra state government to say that we cannot give you autonomy, because 25 crores for an education institute, at that time our annual budget itself was 25 crores. So getting 25 crores in one go was a big thing. So that prompted all the authorities, Mumbai University as well as Maharashtra state government, to give autonomy. And I have prepared a particular slide pointing out how the productivity significantly improves when a more freedom is given to the academics. So on the x-axis, I have plotted the extent of autonomy. On the y-axis, I had plotted the number of publications which were coming out. So till 1975, we had certain number of publications coming out, maybe 40, 50 per year. 1975, we got a partial functional autonomy, right? Only partial. 1984, we got real, what you can call it as a financial autonomy. There we were able to handle our own finances with the permission of the university itself. The moment we got that autonomy, the slope of this line of productivity versus time suddenly went up. The slope increased. Then in 1984, we got this functional autonomy. In 1990, we got academic autonomy. As soon as the academic autonomy was given, again the slope increased. Then in 2008, deemed university stopped, again the slope increased. So if you give freedom, and if the people are going to utilize that freedom responsibly, the productivity of any institute definitely increases. So government, now you see that many colleges have also received autonomy. Now cluster universities are getting formed. So this idea is now dawning on the government that give an autonomy for and remove the shackles and the controls which are necessary for the institute to flourish, and the institute indeed will flourish. So it is exactly the same story which happened in the case of ICT, and every stage of autonomy, additional autonomy, has shown that the ICT output has increased significantly.
Great, sir. Great. Professor Pandit, we have heard that since the very inception of the institute, there is amazing chemistry between faculty member of ICT and industry. So what we talk about industry academia interaction, the ICT is one of the examples where it is proved that it exists. I want you to please tell us about the interdependence that exists between industry and academia in ICT and what is the reason for that.
Yeah, okay. Now you must look into the history and the origin of ICT formation.
Right, sir.
In 1930s or 1920s, Mumbai was a hub center for textile business, right? So at that point of time, people realized that to maintain and for the growth of the textile business, competent engineering manpower would be required. So with the help of philanthropists and the local government at that point of time, ICT or UDCT at that point of time was initiated with the help and donation coming from the industry. There was very little money given by the government at that point of time. Major donations came from the industrialists and philanthropists, which allowed us to initiate or start UDCT with only two courses, chemical engineering and textile engineering or textile chemistry and engineering, because those were the only two sort of branches of engineering which were required at that point of time. Subsequently, with the growth in the chemical sciences, we started introducing pharmaceuticals chemistry, polymer chemistry, paint chemistry, food chemistry, dyes and intermediate chemistry. So all the oleochemicals. So all these started slowly. And I think every 2 or 3 or 4 years or so, we introduced one new course. And then currently the courses which are currently run in ICT, we have 7 or 8 courses. All those courses were started not from 1933 to start with, but way back, way as late as 1960s or mid 60s. Now the issue there is because the institute was started with the promotion of an industry had a stake in the graduates of UDCT because they were interested in finding out whether the institute is really producing quality graduates which can be employed, so on and so forth. So, and they realized the industry at that point of time, which was extremely notable to say that the first 4 PhDs in engineering and technology in India came from UDCT. They were PhDs in science subjects, but first 4 PhDs in engineering and technology came from UDCTs, 1941, 42, 43, before independence. Now, this has now become a part of DNA of UDCT or ICT. What has happened is, so people who are involved in the research always look at the utility component of the research. As a result of which, they will always find that the research which they carry out, the work they carry out and the outcome is likely to be usable for the industry. 2 or 3 things which were also extremely important, which was promoted by Professor Sharma as well as others, that the vacation period, they would recommend the student, the faculty to spend 2 months of vacation period in an industry. Go and spend it anyway. You're not doing anything. Go and sit in an industry. Talk to the people on the shop floor. Find out what their problems are. Now that resulted into finding relevant research problems when they returned. Now that also helped in terms of their teaching. So it's actually a circular kind of an education. No? You do research, you find out something new, you go to an industry, you implement that. In the process, you learn something new. You teach that while coming into the class. So everybody benefits. So teaching, research, and communication in terms of published literature, as Professor Sharma always says, are the 3 things which you need to continue as a good teacher or a good academic. And this is exactly has been happening. And whenever a new faculty comes, a senior faculty takes a mentorship for that, allows some of his consultancies to be passed on to the junior faculty till junior faculty establishes itself. And I mean, every faculty in ICT almost gets double the salary, his own salary and consultancy money, which is probably sometimes equal to or more than the salary itself. In fact, some of our faculties are such that 1/3 of the consultancy fees are paid to ICT return.
Okay.
So they are paying sometimes more than what they get in terms of their salary through
Okay.
consultancy.
That's great. That's great, sir. So they are asset for the organization and they are giving that back.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to know, the next question is related to the whatever we have already discussed. And I want to ask you how ICT is in position, how they can engage industry so well. What is the secret for that? Though you have told a little bit about that also. And normally the industries are reluctant to provide their problems to the academia, thinking that they may not solve it. But that is not true in case of ICT, and ICT can become example or role model for rest of the academic institutes in India, and this problem can be solved. So what is the secret of that?
Yeah, there are two simple statements which I'll make. If you want to interact with an industry and convince the industry, you need to shift your language from academic language to industrial language.
Yes.
And for industry to understand, they need to shift their focus from only money part to innovation part and to development part. Now that is where the real picture comes in. And I think, as I said, that the DNA of ICT allows the faculty not necessarily start with differential equations, but starts with the problem which is faced by an industry and learn or speak the language which industry understands. That is, if you solve this particular problem, you are likely to have your bottom line reduced to such level, you will make yourself more profitable. Industry immediately understands that language. So speaking and understanding each other's language has been the key to the success of ICT's interaction with the industry. So essentially, you do exactly the same thing because you are going to do that based on your competence. But while communicating that, you just change the language. किसी से हिंदी में बात करते हैं तो ज़्यादा समझ में आता है, किसी से इंग्लिश में बात करते हैं तो ज़्यादा समझ में आता है. वो इंडस्ट्री का एक लैंग्वेज है, academic का एक लैंग्वेज है. You cannot communicate with industry speaking in academic language. You need to speak to them in industry language, and that's the training which our younger faculty is also given by some of the senior faculty.
That's great. That's great, sir. Professor Pandit, my next question is related to stalwart of ICT. The institute improved considerably under the directorship of Venkataraman and M.M. Sharma, sir.
Yeah.
Now, what were the major contributions of these initial directors to the institute?
These initials directors of the institute has not only contributed to ICT or UDCT, they, in my opinion, they have contributed to the entire gamut of chemical sciences in India. It's national contribution. It is not limited to the contribution of UDCT or ICT alone. The kind of rigor, academic rigor, which Professor Venkataraman followed while teaching, while carrying out research was absolutely exemplary. And you will find his students went on to become directors of National Chemical Laboratories and others, Professor B.D. Tilak, so on and so forth. There are many stalwarts which ICT has produced. You may be aware of the fact that ICT has a significant number of Padma awardees. If one institute producing that many Padma awardees is unheard of. Now, regarding Professor Sharma's specific contribution, if I want to say, he made ICT name international. Not that it wasn't international earlier, but the kind of visibility of ICT or UDCT to the international community was specifically can be attributed significantly to Professor Sharma's efforts. Mainly because when Professor Sharma did his PhD in Cambridge and came back, he had learned many things in Cambridge and has also understood what is the SOP of success in terms of why Cambridge University Department of Chemical Engineering was so popular in the UK. Why can't ICT be equally, if not more popular in India? So whatever he learned, he adopted it. And the kind of innovative, idea-based research he's a basic originator of that. I mean, the new concept which Professor Dr. Mashelkar also talks about is frugal engineering, frugal research. You should see Professor M.M. Sharma's earlier research efforts. I mean, they are real frugal. With the total budget of 17,000 rupees per annum for research activities, what more can you do? You could only do it by thinking here. So the contribution of M.M. Sharma is, in my opinion, is professor's contribution is promoting innovative and idea-based research, not instrument and equipment-based research. Subsequently, of course, when things became, let's say, more available in terms of resource and others, things did change. But the original research orientation was always idea-based research rather than equipment or instrument-based research. So these are the two specific contributions which I think are noteworthy as far as these two stalwarts are concerned.
Yes, sir. So ICT is famous for stalwart, and you rightly said Padma awardees, so many Padma awardees from ICT.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you, sir, for that, and you are heading that institute. Okay.
I've been given a responsibility, as our honorable Prime Minister said, he's a Pradhan, not a Pradhan Mantri, but he's a Pradhan Sevak. So I'm here to serve ICT, nothing else.
That's great, sir. So my next point of interaction is related to Center of Excellence status and Elite Institute status given to ICT by Maharashtra government, and it puts ICT at par with other reputed institutes like IITs, IIScs, IISCRs. It also makes institute eligible for various special grants from union and state government. So what are the differences now between ICT and other institutes if I talk about like IITs?
Okay, let me tell you that even though for namesake we are on par with ICT is on par with IITs or ICERs, which is what the Center of Excellence essentially indicates. In terms of resources, we are still a poor state-funded university. ICT and IIT, if you consider IIT's budget, it is 10 times more of ICT. ICT gets only the salaries of the teaching and non-teaching staff from the state government. ICT does not get the electricity bill, the water bill, the communication bill, the internet bill. We do not get anything from the state government. All this is supported through ICT generating extramural funds through project funding, consultancy, 1/3 share of the consultancy, and donations from the alumni. ICT's current budget is to the tune of about 60 crores or no. So annual budget is only about 60 crores or so. And we bring in nearly 60 to 70 crores worth of projects every year. And 10% or 15% of that comes as overheads. And that is what allows us to survive. So unless there is something like a block grant, which IITs get, that and then the freedom to spend that block grant is left to the IIT Board of Governors, something like that, if it is done, then only ICT can take a quantum jump in terms of its efforts. Otherwise, the scalability under existing situation where we get only the salaries of the teaching and non-teaching staff and no other funding possibilities, no other infrastructural facilities, it is going to be extremely difficult, and we'll have to rely on the generosity of our alumni, which needs to be recognized, of course, at every point of this. We have survived mainly because of their generosities.
Okay, that's great, sir. So next, my point of discussion, sir, is related to satellite campuses of ICT. Presently, ICT has satellite campuses in Maharashtra, Jalna, and Bhubaneswar in Odisha. Now it is in Odisha, it is in collaboration with the, I think, Indian Oil Corporation and IIT Kharagpur.
Correct.
So I want to ask you, sir, what is this satellite campuses? What is the purpose of that?
Yeah, the satellite campuses, in fact, the Jalna campus, let me start with Jalna campus, was initiated by the ICT alumni who come from that region, Aurangabad, Jalna region. They realized that there is an opportunity to have a good institute in such a location where there are 3 MIDCs near Aurangabad. There are multiple industries, steel industries are there in Jalna, but they are extremely poor of the manpower, competent manpower availability. So they thought that if an institute is brought in here, then it will definitely be helpful for the growth and progress of the region. So ICT alumni from Jalna region essentially initiated this particular activity, and under the Maharashtra state government's development of Marathwada region, uh, substantial sums were allocated at that point of time, and ICT also got about 203 acres of land completely free from the state government, along with about 100 crores, and 100 crores was to be raised by ICT alone. So about 293 crores allocation for the budget was made. But the whole objective was with an intention of developing a particular region of the country to bring in ICT's expertise, ICT's ethos, and ICT's working pattern to duplicate or to triplicate wherever it is possible. As far as ICT Bhubaneswar campus is concerned, it is supported by Indian Oil Corporation through corporate social responsibility based funding. Now, again, there a similar situation, Bhubaneswar that way. In fact, whole of Orissa is not that developed, and whatever institutes which were there, now IIT Bhubaneswar has been there. IIT Bhubaneswar was being promoted at that point of time with the help of IIT Kharagpur. IIT Kharagpur were mentor. So the location and the buildings where IIT Bhubaneswar was started by IIT Kharagpur. Now IIT Bhubaneswar has a full beautiful campus, and the buildings of IIT Kharagpur, which were vacated by IIT Bhubaneswar, are currently being occupied by ICT IOC Bhubaneswar campus.
Okay.
That is where IIT Kharagpur's contribution has come in. They have been extremely generous. In addition to that, there are executive MTech programs, especially targeting the oil PSUs, which has been conducted jointly by ICT and IIT Kharagpur. The whole objective of starting this satellite campus, that there is no scope to increase the size here in Mumbai because we are only 16 acres or so. The only thing what we can do is you can go vertically, you cannot spread out. And there are students available, very good students available. And if these students are given an opportunity in the region, then it is always possible that we will get a satisfaction that ICT has been able to do what you can call it as a spreading of the knowledge which is getting generated, not limiting it, restricting it to Mumbai or a developed region, can also shift it to a lesser developed region of the country. That was the intention of starting this. Our programs are also significantly different. They are not the duplication of the programs at ICT. We run a trimester program and an integrated master's program, where by the time they do complete their master's degree, they do dual degree, chemical engineering, and a minor degree in maybe polymers or paints or foods or pharma. By the time they complete 5 years of their education, they would have spent 1.5 to 2 years in an industry. So they are industry ready people, because significant nearly 5 or 6 internships are involved. Academic internship, industrial internship, hands-on internship. So different internships are involved, which is a part of this particular programs which are run at ICT Bhubaneswar as well as Jalna.
Great, sir. So, Professor Pandit, I want to ask you, sir, like now next my domain of interaction is related to faculty positions and teachers in ICT, because ICT has always has the legacy of having stalwart as teachers and mentors. ICT is successfully able to engage even visiting faculties who typically are from industry, as industry academy interaction is very good. So what I know is like industry people come and they mentor or teach students in the campus of ICT also. So what is the impact of having such industry researcher oriented faculty which come to ICT?
Yeah. See, industrial interaction happens on three fronts. We have more than 50 adjunct professors, and they are essentially from industry or from other research institutes. Now they spend anywhere between 1 week to 3 months, depending upon the availability of the time. They teach specific courses, special courses. ICT also runs a postgraduate diploma program called Chemical Technology Management. Now, this particular program is run especially for a PhD students. After they have done 2 years of their PhD, they can simultaneously take up this particular program. And in addition to PhD, they can also get a diploma in chemical technology management. Now, incidentally, this entire diploma program is run by ICT alumni coming from industry. The courses and classes are conducted on Saturday, Sundays only. So in addition to 5 days of research, these PhD students will engage themselves in this chemical technology management program and get a diploma as well as their PhD. Now, this has resulted into ICT doing research in relevant areas. Not that we do not do a blue sky research, but we have a proper spread of research, which is essentially a top class research, a blue sky research, where the application is not thought of, but you are trying to understand the basic phenomena concept. There are people who will work essentially in industry based problems or debottlenecking or solving industrial problems. There are going to be people who would think in terms of innovation brought into processes, products, so on and so forth. So my assessment is having this proper mix of faculty interested in fundamental research, interested in applied research, interested in social research. Now bringing this all heterogeneous faculty together and maintaining it and trying to give a justification and opportunity to each of them to meet their own aspirations in terms of their satisfaction is a key factor which the ICT governing board is looking into. So whenever people feel that I am having this opportunity in ICT, somebody says, no, I can have this opportunity also in ICT. So making these opportunities available in ICT has become the key driving force to attract good faculty. When I say good faculty means good expertise is the correct description. Now that expertise comes in the form of demonstration, in the form of lectures, in the form of visits or whatever it may be. But that brings a sort of a holistic approach to the kind of education which our students receive when they join ICT.
Great, sir. Professor Pandit, I want to also ask you, sir, about the faculty endowments. So it is very amazing to observe that there are 90 faculty endowments in the institute, and ICT has a long tradition of establishing such endowments with the objective of supporting the faculty positions. Foreign travel assistance and merit cum scholarship is being offered. Please guide us how other institutes of our nation, our country, can attract such endowments.
Okay. Now there is a bit of Gandhian philosophy involved in this.
Okay.
I'll tell you how and why I say that. Whenever an industry comes and talks to a faculty, ICT faculty will not ask for money first. What is your problem? Let me see if the problem can be solved. I think many of our faculty, and in fact, Professor Sharma is known, he has offered so many free suggestions and free innovative suggestions that people feel obliged. And when they start making money out of those suggestions, out of those ideas, they feel obliged. अरे ये ठीक नहीं है, अब मैंने इतना पैसा ये आइडिया इस्तेमाल करके किया है तो कुछ देना चाहिए. So they will come upfront and offer money. Right? Then of course the proper documentation and other things needs to be done. But the basic intention comes from the fact that these people, our faculty here, are there only for the betterment of education, betterment of the students, and whatever we give them is going to be overall beneficial. The faculty is not going to be essentially benefited individually because of this particular donation. once this trust comes that the faculty is genuinely working for an institute and not for his or her individual benefits, there is enough amount of money available in our country. You require a good cause, you require an honesty and integrity of the cause, and you require a good methodology of spending that particular amount of money. Now, if these three factors can be combined and you write a proposal and every year you submit that, look, this is the money which you have received for this purposes, this money has been submitted, people are more than willing to come forward and give money. So there is no dearth of availability of money provided you have a good cause and you are honest in terms of your intentions.
That is the mantra, sir, you have given us, and I'm very sure it is going to work. Professor Pandit, some of the eminent faculty in ICT come from MIT, Purdue, Cambridge, Monash, Berkeley, Montreal. So there are many UG PG courses where these faculties have taught. Foreign universities, when they recruit, like MIT, when they recruit, they go globally and find the best talent to attract best faculty in their institute. So foreign universities get the best brain as far as the faculties are concerned. ICT was lucky to have professors educated in Cambridge like Professor Sharma and all, who came back and joined also. So my question to you, sir, is why ICT is not giving the permanent faculty position to foreigners if they are willing to come at all, and how ICT is attracting the best brain to the position of faculty?
Okay, let me answer that. It would have been possible if we were governed by the central government. With the Maharashtra state government and ICT still being funded by the Maharashtra state government, we still rely on the Maharashtra state government funding our salaries. It is not possible for us to have that. However, some of the endowment positions, we have really used it for outside faculties. The faculties which have come, people have come and spent MIT, Purdue, which you talked about. This has happened, and this has happened for extended periods, 1 semester, 2 semester, a year. But otherwise, getting a permanent faculty, foreign faculty, and there have been cases where people from abroad have come and have spent 2 or 3 years here and tried their best. But sometimes the kind of facilities and the bureaucracy which exist in the country as such, and that comes mainly from the paucity of funds. We are relying completely on the state funding, state government funding. So unless that is changed, I don't think it is going to be possible for us to have permanent faculty. Now, if permanent faculty comes, where is he going to get accommodation in Mumbai? Right? Only when we constructed a faculty tower, again through a generous donation from our alumni, we could get 40 flats, which helped us in getting good faculty. Otherwise, even if an outside faculty wants to come in Mumbai, it's impossible to find a place, buy a place. With academic salary, it is just not possible, right? So, but in case of IIT, that is not a place. You have central funding available for the construction of buildings, for the construction of hostels, for the construction of faculty houses. Now, unless you have that kind of a funding available, it is not going to be possible. So only when somebody comes up and says that, look, here are 500 crores or here are 1,000 crores, you show me what you're going to do with these 1,000 crores, how would you come up? I have a DPR, detailed project report, available to take ICT into next phase if required. But currently there are constraints within which we have to work.
Thank you, sir. So, Professor Pandit, ICT graduates about 100 PhDs annually.
143 this year.
Great. And I came to know through you only, sir, like first 3 PhDs in engineering in 1941, 42, 43, if I'm not wrong, were from this department, now what is called ICT. That is a really very good news, actually. Now, this speaks volume about a strong research culture in ICT. I want to ask you, sir, how are you able to roll out so many PhDs with really good research every year? What is the secret for that?
Um, there's no secret as such. Uh, when see students will go where students will go with three intentions. One, wherever they feel that the kind of education which they get will allow them a good opportunity in terms of job. Now that job opportunity could be in an industry or could be in academics. The people who do bachelor's and stop at bachelor's or to a certain extent masters rarely want to go into academics. They want to go into industry as a job, or they start their own entrepreneurship activities. The students who are going for PhD are doing PhD are essentially academically oriented. So I would say that in a way, ICT has a bias towards PhD, and ICT is aimed toward creating good academics, right? Because earlier PhDs were very rarely employed in an industry. It was again Professor Sharma's efforts where PhDs started getting employment in an industry. And Professor Sharma was the one who convinced industry that do employ some PhDs from ICT and you will benefit. And when the industry started seeing the benefits, of course, the opportunities of the students increase in terms of PhD students also finding a job in an industry. Now, when you do a PhD, in addition to only sticking to academics, now you also have a possibility to join an industry with significant industrial research currently going on in India. The students who started opting for a PhD started increasing. Previously, they were limited to BTech or BChem Eng, then it became masters, then became PhD. Because what used to happen earlier, that whenever you advance your degree, you narrow down your opportunity, job opportunities. But because of the efforts of Professor Sharma and people like Professor Joshi and others, where people started or students started realizing that even when I do my PhD, I am not focusing, narrowing down my opportunities. In fact, I'm widening my opportunities. That is the reason more and more PhD students started coming, and we started graduating more and more PhD students.
Yes, sir, that is true. In fact, I interacted with Professor Sharma and he narrated that thing very beautifully.
Yeah.
How PhDs were recruited by industries and how he convinced the industries.
Yeah.
That is a story in itself. That is
Itself.
beautifully explained. My next question to you is related only, sir. It is related to the research culture in ICT and some research facilities, if you can tell us.
Now, research culture, of course, research culture starts from second year onwards. We have internship for second year, third year students. We also participate in the internship for other undergraduates who are sponsored by the three Indian academies: Indian Academy of Sciences, Indian National Academy of Engineering, and National Academy of Sciences, India. Now, they select every year certain undergraduates, and 40 or so undergraduates come to ICT for summer internship program. Now, the research starts there, and I have seen that people do not, I mean, young students do not have an idea what is actually involved in the research. When they do these 2 months of 3 months of internship, many students, इसको बोलते हैं ना कि चस्का लग जाता है research करने का. So they get that chaska in that 2 months, and that some of them continue, come for masters, do their PhD, and again the number of PhDs start increasing. So research gets initiated in the students from second year, third year onwards. So they would have had that experience. Now that culture is cultivated. What happens is in the teaching as well, translation of that research as well. So you will find that the ICT faculty never refers to one book. He will refer to one book maybe for the sake of a textbook, but he will refer to 50 research papers appearing in the journals. He will prepare notes based on the latest finding, what is happening latest. And when the students start getting the latest information, they also get motivated to find out more. And research is nothing but trying to find out more. right? And this orientation of research itself means that this inclination of finding out more, which exists in every child, somehow gets rekindled again when students come back to ICT to do their graduation or post-graduation.
Great, sir. Professor Pandit, I want you to tell us something about annual peer-reviewed journal titled The Bombay
Bombay
Technologist.
Technologies, yeah.
Yeah,
The Bombay Technologies is what you can call it as ICT's own research journal, right? It is essentially the same as all these internships which I told you about. The outcome of these internships or the review articles which students write during their undergraduate days, you need a forum to publish these things. So, because many a times these are not necessarily full-fledged research articles, they are exploratory research activities or exploratory research areas where they need an outlet. Somebody is pointing, I've just started my work and I want to publicize. So it's like giving a news item in a newspaper. So similarly, that is the purpose which Bombay Technologies has served, where it has become a research face or a research voice of the students of ICT. So you will find that emerging areas of research, review articles, the proof of concept based articles, those are the kind of articles or topics which you will be covered in this Bombay Technologies. Now to make it rigorous or to make it peer reviewed, it's not that you send an article and it gets published. It properly goes through a review by the faculty of ICT, some of the faculty of ICT, and then it follows the same procedure like any international journal, but it is not sent internationally. It is essentially assessed by the ICT faculty itself before it is selected for publication.
Professor Pandit, my next question is related to this only, like Bombay Technologist Undergraduate Research Program. Please tell us something about that.
Yeah, it is the same as what I told you about internship.
Right, sir.
There are multiple internship opportunities available, ranging from a student while doing internship getting 5,000 rupees per month to getting as high as 20,000 rupees per month, depending upon different types of programs which are available.
Right.
So Bombay Technologies undergraduate research program is one such internship, especially focusing on the identifying an area which is an emerging area and writing a review article or doing some proof of concept research, which is done as an internship. So this is what this particular program is all about.
Okay.
It doesn't have a large number. It has got only one or two such internships, but on an average, 40 interns are available, are taken up every year, which are sponsored by a variety of agencies. And Bombay Technologies Undergraduate Research happens to be one such.
Great, sir. Sir, ICT has developed the technology which is consistently being commercialized, and that is something which is the need of the hour. Illustration to this effect is the technology for hydrogen production by water splitting. Technology has been successfully scaled up to the pilot scale and transferred for commercial deployment to ONGC. Now, the technology has been granted patents in Korea, Japan, USA, Canada, China. I want you to tell us the success story of this technology, sir, and also some success stories, similar other success stories.
Well, I was sort of supervising this in that this particular hydrogen using water splitting was developed by Professor G.D. Yadav, the previous Vice Chancellor, and he is the one who has got these patents on hydrogen generation. Now, this is a requirement of the nation, right? Hydrogen as a fuel is a requirement of the nation. Now, there are many chemical cycles through which the hydrogen can be generated. There is iodine cycle, there is a sulfur cycle, there is a chloride, hydrogen, copper, chloride cycle. So all these are essentially governed by the final economics of hydrogen generation. So unless hydrogen is generated at less than 100 rupees a kg, it is not going to be economically viable in terms of its calorific value. Now, this particular technology has shown a potential that it is indeed possible because of the recyclability. Technology still has issues related to the MOCs because we are doing handling chlorine at high temperatures. So the corrosion and other things are going to be issues. But BARC scientists are involved in this, and they are developing materials where these chlorine-based systems can be handled. So I think even though the pilot has been commissioned and a large-scale pilot is being planned in Gujarat, it will take another 5 years or so before the technology can really see the light of the day in terms of its commercial exploitation and its transfer to other countries. Now, of course, you can't dig the well when you are thirsty. So in anticipation that this technology will be adopted by many other countries, the patent has been filed in other countries such as Japan, Canada, Korea, so on and so forth. So if the technology and the problem associated with the MOCs are resolved, this technology has a great future.
Great, sir. Professor Pandit, I want to know your vision and mission and roadmap for ICT being director of this institute. It's a challenging task.
I think it's not a challenging task in a way, but at the same time, it is challenging task. Now, what is the vision for the country? Somebody asked me a question, what is your objective as a teacher? So I said that I really don't know, which made me think. And I said, let me give it a thought. And I thought for a day and I came up with a very simple answer. I said, as a teacher, I want to generate competent students who will contribute 20,000 crores to India's GDP. So similarly, my vision for ICT is ICT and ICT graduates should be able to contribute more than 15 to 20% of GDP. That's all. Bottom line is that.
Okay, that's a great.
If you see Niti Aayog, our vice chairman of Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, did some quick back of the envelope calculations. And he said that ICT and ICT alumni, right, have been contributing to the tune of 8% of the GDP. 8% of one institute and institute's alumni has been contributing 8%. Of course, a major contribution, a chunk comes from Mukesh Bhai Ambani with the kind of contribution the Reliance is doing to the Indian GDP. But it is a significant number for a single institute to have that kind of a contribution to India GDP. So my objective as far as ICT's mission and vision is, ICT should be in a position to contribute 15% or 20% to India GDP.
Okay, that's great, sir. That's a huge target you have kept, sir. And even knowledge of the fact that ICT directly, indirectly contributes 8% GDP is a huge, sir. It is really huge. It is just like one of the economy sector itself. Okay.
Indeed.
Yes. Sir, my next question is related to, I mean, little deviating from my questionnaire, but I thought of asking it, and that is,
Sure.
when I was interacting with Professor Sharma, he told me that he got opportunities to be professor not only abroad universities but IITs also, but he preferred to be in ICT. Now I see your case also, sir, and your case is similar. My question is, why ICT? Why not IITs? Why not others? Why people like ICT so much?
There are, if I want to answer that, Jenny, is the kind of level of comfort which you feel. Sometimes it's not that you want to rise to a particular position. Along with that, you want to get that sense of satisfaction and be happy for what you are doing. Now, Professor Sharma says something, and I completely understand and totally follow that philosophy. He said earlier also, and he even says that I did whatever I wanted to do all my life, right? And I got fortunate enough that I got paid for it. right? So I'm exactly selling in the same boat. I have always done whatever I wanted to do and got paid for it. And my expectations is not to make millions. My expectation is sufficient enough to, to satisfy the needs and desires of the family, nothing beyond that. And fortunately, coming from higher middle class family, wife being a similar higher middle class family, expectations are not huge. Even if you give me 100 crores tomorrow, I will think how I can use that 100 crores for the betterment of ICT rather than going and buying a BMW or something to drive about. Now, that kind of a philosophical outlook is mostly present in ICT's culture itself, which I don't know what it originates from. Maybe in case of Professor Sharma, it is the Chinmayananda Ashram original influencing him. In my case, probably 5 years stay in Banaras and Kashi Vishwanath ji's teachings probably has influenced me. But there is something which allows me to be happy and keep performing what I wanted to do in life and continue to do that all along. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Sir, I want your message, which you want to give to people doing engineering in various institutes in India.
My only suggestion is do not get carried away by the bandwagon. Right? Do not get carried away by the buzzwords or the fashion words which appear in the either in the newspaper or in the journals, so on and so forth. Identify the real needs of our country, of our society. Be observant about your environment, and you will find hundreds of problems which are waiting to be solved. And as an engineer, you have the capability of solving those particular problems. Solve those problems for the sake of solving those problems. Many a times you try to take you take a puzzle and you solve the puzzle. You don't get any reward for solving that particular puzzle, but it is the kind of a satisfaction that yes, hurrah, I've been able to solve this particular puzzle. Similarly, try to solve problem for the sake of solving problem.
Yes.
Not whether you want to use it or somebody uses your solution or not. Doesn't matter. You get the satisfaction of solving that particular problem. And the problems are in plenty and they are facing you and you are just being blind to those particular problems. You identify and try to look at the problems which appear in published literature and journal, but those are not the real problems. Those are the problem faced by others. Our problems are different, and
Different.
for us to understand our problems, we need to be observant about our surroundings.
Okay. Professor Pandit, the majority of my students on my channel, they are the students, engineering students aspiring to be in higher education institutes and pursue masters or doctorate. Sir, they have one thing in their mind that if we go for higher education, shall we get career? Shall we get career in academics or jobs or industries? Sir, being director of prestigious ICT, Professor Pandit, what is your advice to such students? Why they should come to ICT, and what if they get into ICT? What kind of jobs or career they are going to get it for masters and doctorate?
It's like this. And Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay was asked a question by one of his acquaintances. He came and said, Panditji, give me a job.
Okay.
So Panditji asked him, what have you done? He said, I have done my BA and then I have done my MA. So Panditji asked him again, but what can you actually do? So he again says that I have done my BA and I have done my MA. So in my opinion, degree is not important. If you are going to come to ICT, see what you can do, what you can learn, and how you can apply your knowledge. Now, whether you get masters or bachelors or PhD, unless you are able to utilize that knowledge and apply that knowledge, the degree has no
No
value.
value.
Right? Every industry or every job opportunity will not give you a degree because you have BTech or MTech or a PhD. You will get a job only because you know something, you are capable of doing something. So every student who comes to ICT with an intention of learning something, there are huge opportunities available in ICT. Don't come here just to get a chapa of ICT, that will not necessarily help. If you come here and genuinely show interest in learning and knowledge improvement, I guarantee you that you will get the best job which is available for your skill set.
Okay, I beg your pardon, sir, but I'm of the opinion that brand of ICT really matters. Brand or chapa is very important.
Brand and chapa is important. It is equal to saying that when the PSUs are there, they say that all those who have got first class should apply.
Yes,
Second class will not. So there is a point.
right, sir.
So ICT student means you will get an opportunity to at least expose yourself to other.
Industries. Yeah.
But
Yes.
what to
Yes,
getting
sir.
the job all depends upon only the first opportunity is provided by the ICT chapa.
Yes.
Nothing else.
After that, no.
Rest,
Yeah.
rest all depends upon how good you are in
Right,
terms
sir.
of what you want to do and what you are able to do.
Right, sir. So I have already taken a lot of time, sir. Last two questions I will shoot. Last two questions. Sorry, sir. My question is, what message would you like to give to management of various institutes? Because you are managing ICT very well. So what message would you like to give to the administrators or the people who are managing other institutes in India?
I said that earlier, and I will repeat it again, that whenever you want to bring in any change, please involve all the
Stakeholders.
stakeholders who are likely to get affected by that particular change.
Very true, sir.
Have consultations and implement that change. If you ask someone what needs to be done, you will get hundreds of answers or you will get a complete silence. You have to think on your own and come up with the solutions, offer a set of solutions, and out of that, the most acceptable solution, which is good for the institute, needs to be chosen. So you must have a set of rules and set of solutions which in your own assessment are good for the institute. So
Okay.
only when you have that list ready all the time, your interaction with anybody else will become naturally that much more involved and detailed so that you will be in a position to convince that person your point of view, which is good for the institute. So my only request to the management is essentially keep aspirations of all the stakeholders in mind while executing any change or while bringing about any change.
Great, sir. Professor Pandit, I wanted to ask you something, sir. When I was interacting with Professor Sharma, and I asked him, sir, why chemical engineering you thought of doing? He said, because of my love for chemistry and my love for maybe mathematics. So I thought of pursuing these two, and that is in chemical engineering only. I want to ask you, sir, now today there are so many opportunities with the youngsters like artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
computer science, and all.
Yeah.
Why youngsters should take chemical engineering as career?
That is the only engineering subject which teaches you a complete material and energy balance.
Okay.
Now, whether you use that material energy balance for electronics, or whether you use that material energy balance for accounting, or whether you use that material energy balance for your weight gain or weight loss, it is still material energy balance. And chemical engineering is the only engineering branch in this entire gamut of engineering which teaches you material and energy balance. And if you master the principles of material energy balance, you can use those principles across any branch of engineering. So you can transfer yourself seamlessly from one branch of engineering to another branch of engineering only if you are trained chemical engineer. So chemical engineer after BTech can become instrumentation engineers, can become safety engineers, can become energy engineers, can become civil engineers or structural engineers. The whole gamut is open in front of you, mainly because you have mastered that one single subject of material energy balance, which is only taught in chemical engineering.
Beautiful, sir. This is a beautiful explanation, material and energy balance. So my last question, Professor Pandit, is I saw you and you referred that you work 7 days a week. You come even on Sundays.
Yeah.
Sir, how do you manage this balance between your professional life and personal life at this age also?
See, when you enjoy doing something, it is not an effort.
That's true.
Effort is always there when you are doing something against your will. Fortunately, my wife is also head of the department of MCA in VJTI, just across the road.
Okay, great.
So she is also an academic. So she
Yes.
knows exactly what is involved. She is equally involved in the students' welfare, so on and so forth. So all this is not a typical job for us. This is a way of living. And when it is a way of living, you live every day. That's it.
Great. That's great, Professor Pandit. Sir, I'm really thankful that you spared 1.5 hours today. And it was really a marathon session of interaction. And I'm very happy, sir, the kind of questions which I jotted down, you answered all the questions, sir. I'm really thankful to you. And I'm very sure this is going to be very, very helpful to the youngsters over there.
Thank you, Vijayender. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to interact with all of you. Thank you.
I'm honored, sir.